John, it's an amazingly detailed book. How did you come to write this?
Well, two things. First, I had all the documents relating to the house from 1771 for 200 years, so that was a start. And then there was lockdown, and I was among the clinically vulnerable who was told to stay away from people, stay at home. So I researched it online.
Was it a eureka moment when you suddenly thought, hey, who lived here before me? Or is it something you've always had in the back of your mind?
Well, to an extent, what really made it come to life was Netflix made Bridgerton in Bath, and they used this house as the home of the mistress of Viscount Bridgerton. And so I was thinking then, I wonder who really lived here. I mean, I watched Bridgerton on television and saw this house being used, and I just thought, I must discover who was here. And they were a fascinating lot of people.
Well, I was going to say, you've done an amazing job in pretty well identifying all the major inhabitants of this building. We can't go through them all, but I was going to ask you to talk about the first and one of the more recent. And the first gentleman had quite an astonishing claim to fame involving the Black Hole of Calcutta.
Indeed, he was one of the 23 survivors of that incident where 120 odd people, 140 people were put in a small prison, and most of them suffocated during the night, and he was one of the survivors.
Let's name him and maybe explain how he came to live here.
Yes, he was called John Zephaniah Holwell, and he would be of great interest to our present Prime Minister because he was a very efficient tax gatherer in Bengal, so good at it that the East India Company, for whom he worked, tripled his salary. And he managed to get all these taxes without upsetting the population, which is extremely clever.
I agree with you. Mr. Sunak would love to have talked to him.
And also, he believed that Hinduism was the first religion that existed before any other religion. And he converted to a sort of Hinduism and certainly became a teetotaler and a vegetarian, both of which were unusual among Europeans at the time.
Did he retire to Bath?
He did, yes. He lived here for 4 or 5 years and built another house in Bath, although nobody knows quite where it was. But he built houses all over the country. He was a compulsive house builder. But he came back from India with about £9 million. Which was quite moderate. I mean, a later person who lived here came back from India with 20 million.
It's silly money as far as I'm concerned. Now, the book chronicles inhabitants of number 10, but can I bring you more up to date to a man I had dealings with because I bought one of his Morris Minors, Mr. Charlie Ware, sadly no longer with us, but a man who made quite an impact in this city.
He did. He bought this house quite early on. Well, he bought it in the 1960s. At the time, Bath was a forgotten city, and the houses here were not selling at all. You could buy a whole house in the Crescent then for about £4,000, and they were not selling even at that price, whereas now they fetch 4 or 5 million. So Charlie bought one early and waited for the moment when he could sell it for a lot of money and start a property empire. And that came when the M4 was opened, because suddenly property prices in Bath tripled overnight. So he mortgaged this house, and with that money he started buying other houses. And his great claim to fame was he rescued Kingsmead Square, which was going to be redeveloped. The council wanted it all pulled down and an office block built there. But he bought it and renovated it, and it's still there today. So he was a goodie as far as that went. I mean, he did some terrible things too, but perhaps we shouldn't go into those.
Well, I don't know how thin the walls are in this wonderful curved terrace, but I wonder if his neighbours ever complained about him, because he wasn't a particularly quiet owner of number 10, was he?
No, the first time I came to number 10 was at a party he gave, where there were 600 people here. Most of them had come from London. They were a varied lot. I mean, there were a lot of, I suppose, what you now call hippies, or called then hippies. There were a couple of rock groups playing. They brought down the ceiling on the first floor. And the garden was just a mass of broken glass from wine glasses that had smashed.
Well, there we go. Charlie making a big impression in many ways. What I liked about your book is not only do you catalogue the inhabitants of number 10, but you do set them in context with both the history of the Crescent and a little bit about Bath at the time they were living here. Was that important to you, to set things in context?
Yes, it was. Especially, I wanted to set it in context of the Crescent as a whole, because the Crescent has always been a sort of village. Less now than it used to be, but because a lot of people who bought houses here no longer live here permanently. They come and go. It's just a second home for them. But it always was a community. People knew each other and they acted together various times, and the last time everyone acted together was to get tourist buses banned from the Crescent, which after 10 years they managed. So,
number 10, as you show in the book, because there is a photo there, was the first house in the Crescent to actually be cleaned, because the Royal Crescent tourists see today is not how it was, 30, 40 years ago?
No, Charlie Ware was the first person to clean a house in the Crescent. It's the first thing he did when he bought this one. And gradually, I mean, in the 50s, were you in Bath in the 50s?
No.
When I came to Bath as a schoolboy in the 50s, and the houses were black with soot and grime from 200 years or more. And it's wonderful to see it cleaned. But Charlie was the first to do it, so good for him.
He physically made his mark. John, fascinating to talk to you. A very interesting book. Well done, you. How can people get a copy?
Well, yes, the best thing they can do is contact me by my email, which is a simple one. It's j.walker1@btinternet.com.
I shall put that on the screen. And how much is it?
It's £9.50. So not a lot as things go.
Having completed this exercise, you're not volunteering to catalogue all the inhabitants of all the other addresses in Royal Crescent?
No, that would be... it took me 2 years to research this one, so I'm too old now to do it again.
Lovely talking to you, John. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.